IAS 20 relates to accounting for government grants and disclosure of government assistance. For our convenience, I have divided IAS 20 into two parts, part 1 and part 2. In this part, that is in the first part, we are going to study the important types of government grants, definitions to the government grants, principles, the general principles of government grants, that is how these government grants should be treated and recognized, and when to recognize the government grants, when they should be recognized in the books of accounts. These are the four aspects we are going to study in this. Government provides money to companies for reasons like export, promotion of local employment, or conservation of nature. Because if a company exports more, the position of balance of payments of the country improves and it is good for the economy. If the company, by giving employment to the local people, improves the local employment, then also more people will get the employment, the economy of the nation will develop. And if the company preserves nature, if it goes for renewable energy or green energy, then also the nature will be protected, and the nature of the country, if protected, it will be good for the country. So for reasons like this, the government will provide grants to the companies. So when these types of grants are provided by the government to the companies, then how we should treat them. This is the whole aspect of IAS 20. So the main types of government grants are revenue grants and capital grants. Revenue grants are the income for the company. So this is directly provided by the government to the companies in the form of some incentives, economic benefits. So that will reduce the expenditures of the companies. For example, if the government provides a part of the wages to the company, the wage payment that the company has to pay to their employees will be reduced. So to that extent, the company will be benefited. So a part of the expenditure will be borne by the government. That is revenue grant, because it is a revenue or income to the company. It is a direct revenue to the company from the government. Next one is capital grants. Money towards purchase of non-current assets. Non-current assets are fixed assets. So these are the money received by the companies from the government for the purchase of fixed assets. So the government will not provide grants for the purchase of all the fixed assets, some specified fixed assets. For example, these fixed assets may harm the environment less. Maybe they are energy conserving fixed assets. They may be green fixed assets. So for the purchase of these specified assets, the government, if they provide grants, that will be the capital grants. International Accounting Standard 20 relates to government grants. So IAS 20 has defined some of the terms related to government grants. So we will look into those terms. The first term is government. We should know, to know government grants, we should know what is a government. So here, government could be any government agency. It could be a state government giving you the grant. It should be the central government giving you the grant, or it could be the local body, the municipality giving you the government grant, or it could be the international body like World Bank giving the company the grant. Government assistance, designed to provide an economic benefit specific to an entity. An entity means a business or a group of businesses, qualifying under certain criteria. So if an economic benefit has been given to all the companies, then it will not be a government assistance. For example, in an industrial area, in a particular industrial area, the government is designing and building a road in that particular industrial area. Then all the companies in that locality will be benefiting from that construction, from that infrastructural activity. Then it will not be a government grant. So the government assistance, to be called as government assistance, should be given to a particular one company or to a particular group of companies, not for all the companies. Next one, government grants. So these are transfer of resources to an entity for past or future compliance with certain conditions. So the company has fulfilled some conditions, or the company is going to fulfill certain conditions. For example, there is an export oriented unit. So for the exports that the company is doing, that means the company has could have already done in the past some exports. For that, the government could be giving some benefit. or the company could be exporting its products in future, because it is concerned with the exporting activity, so it is obvious that the company will export its products in the future. So for that future export, the government is giving the grant. So if in future the company does not export those specified number of products, the government can withdraw that benefit. That means if the company has taken that economic benefit in the condition that it will export, and if it fails to export, the company will have to give back the grant to the government. Next, grant related to assets. So for the purchase of some specified fixed assets, long term assets means fixed assets, the government may give grants. So it will not give grant for all the fixed assets. Those fixed assets which help to conserve nature or which is beneficial for the economy, for those assets the government will give grant. For example, for the purchase of a windmill. So windmill, it is a renewable energy. So let us say the government gives 20% on the cost of windmill. So that 20% will be the grant related to asset. Next one, grant related to income. So these are not for any particular fixed assets, but for expenses. Let us say in a hospital, for the salary of nurses, the government is giving 30% grant on the salary of nurses. So if the whole salary of the nurses in that hospital is 10 lakhs, then 30% of that 3 lakhs. So 3 lakh is the grant related to income given by the government to that particular hospital. Next, general principles. Two general principles have been followed by IAS 20 in the recognition of grants. The first principle is prudence. Grants should not be recognized until conditions for the receipt have been complied. That means the company or the institution should have been fulfilled all the conditions for the grant. Let us say the grant is for the payment of salary of the nurses in a hospital. So the government is going to give 30% of the salary of the nurses. So what are the conditions? The first condition is that the hospital should have employed the number of nurses specified by the government. So if the government has specified that 100 nurses should be working in the hospital, it should be made sure by the hospital that more than 100 of nurses is working in that hospital. Mind you, the grant is for the salary of the nurses. So the hospital should have already paid the salary of the nurses to their respective accounts. It should have the ability to provide the proof of the payment of the salary to the nurses. So maybe it can show the salary register maintained by the hospital to the government as a proof of the payment of the salary. So the condition would be employment of nurses and payment of salary or salary paid. And there should be reasonable assurance that the grant will be received. What will be the assurance? It is the letter by the government or notification by the government that the hospitals which employ more than 100 nurses will be eligible for 30% of the salary of the nurses. So that letter will be the assurance. So if both compliance from the hospital and assurance by the government is there, then only we can recognize the government grant. So that is the principle of prudence. Next one, accrual. Grants should be matched with the expenditure towards which they were intended to contribute. So this relates to revenue grant. So the expenditure we make should be matched with the grants we receive. For example, we can take the above example itself. So 30% of the salary, if 10 lakhs is the total salary of the nurses, the grant will be 30% of 10 lakhs, that is 3 lakhs. So expenditure related to grant is 3 lakhs. Then the grant the hospital going to receive is also 3 lakhs. So these two should be matched. So we should not claim grant to any other expenditure. We can claim grant only for the payment of salary of the nurses, and that too up to 30%. So let us say payment of salary of doctors, that we cannot claim because the government grant is only for the salary of the nurses. So we have to claim only for the same head. We have to match the expenditure with the grant. That is the principle of accrual. So when can we recognize government grants in the books of accounts of the company? Let us see an example. The government has announced a grant towards the stipend paid to the interns. This company, Firefox Cycles, have employed 5 interns. The government has issued a letter confirming Firefox eligibility for the grant. So the principle here says that there should be reasonable assurance that the entity will comply with the conditions. So has this company, Firefox, has complied with the conditions? Yes, it has employed 5 interns. And the second principle is that there should be assurance that the grants will be received. So is there the assurance that the grants will be received? Yes, the government has issued a letter confirming Firefox eligibility. The government has said in written form that the Firefox has the right to receive the grant. So in the accrual concept, we have studied that when a party has the legal right to receive the economic benefit, then we can treat that it has been received. So Firefox has the legal right to receive the grant. So we can recognize this government grant. Next, types of grants. Government grants ಅಲ್ಲಿ 2 types ಇದೆ. Grants relating to income, grants relating to assets. Grants relating to assets ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಪುನಃ 2 types ಇದೆ. Capital approach ಹಾಗೂ income approach. Grants relating to income ಅಥವಾ revenue grants. Grants related to income are government grants other than those related to assets, known as revenue grants. ಅಂದರೆ ಯಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ಅಸೆಟ್ಸ್ಗೆ ರಿಲೇಟೆಡ್ ಆಗಿರುವುದಿಲ್ಲ ಅದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ನಾವು ರೆವೆನ್ಯೂ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೇವೆ. ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ಶೆಲ್ ಬಿ ರೆಕಗ್ನೈಸ್ಡ್ ಇನ್ P&L ಆನ್ ಎ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ಯಾಟಿಕ್ ಬೇಸಿಸ್ ಓವರ್ ದ ಪೀರಿಯಡ್ಸ್. ಅಂದರೆ ನೀವು ಒಂದು ಹಾಸ್ಪಿಟಲ್ ಕನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಷನ್ಗೆ ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ತಗೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ. ಸೊ ಆಗ ಏನಾಗ್ತದೆ, ನಿಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಸ್ಪಿಟಲ್ನ ಕನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಷನ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ಮುಂದೆ ಹೋದಾಗೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತದೆ. ಸೊ ಅದನ್ನು ನಿಮಗೆ ಅಮೌಂಟ್ ಬಂದ ಹಾಗೆ ನೀವು ಅದನ್ನು ಪ್ರಾಫಿಟ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಲಾಸ್ ಅಕೌಂಟಲ್ಲಿ ರೆಕಗ್ನೈಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಹೋದ್ರಾಯಿತು. ಈಗ ಪ್ರೀವಿಯಸ್ ಇಯರ್ 5,000 ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದೆ, ಈ ವರ್ಷ 10,000 ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದೆ ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಈ ವರ್ಷ ಪ್ರಾಫಿಟ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಲಾಸ್ ಅಕೌಂಟಲ್ಲಿ 10,000, ಪ್ರೀವಿಯಸ್ ಇಯರ್ನ ಪ್ರಾಫಿಟ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಲಾಸ್ ಅಕೌಂಟಲ್ಲಿ 5,000. ಈ ಥರ ಓವರ್ ದ ಪೀರಿಯಡ್ಸ್ ರೆಕಗ್ನೈಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಹೋದ್ರಾಯಿತು. Over the periods in which the entity recognizes as expenses the related costs for which the grants are intended to compensate. The recognition of the grant will depend upon the circumstances. If the grant is paid when evidence is produced that certain expenditure has been incurred, the grant should be matched with that expenditure. For example, grant related to receipt of teacher's salary would be recognized in the period when salary expense is paid. ಒಂದು ಕಾಲೇಜಿಗೆ ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಯಾವುದಕ್ಕೆ? ಟೀಚರ್ಸ್ನ ಸ್ಯಾಲರಿಗೆ ಅಂತಾದರೆ. ಸೊ ನಾವು ಪ್ರತಿ ಸ್ಯಾಲರಿ ಪೇಮೆಂಟ್ಗೆ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಆ ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಗ್ರಾಂಟನ್ನು ರೆಕಗ್ನೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಆಯಿತು, ಅಂದರೆ ಇನ್ಕಮ್ ಆಗಿ ರೆಕಗ್ನೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಆಯಿತು ಪ್ರಾಫಿಟ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಲಾಸ್ ಅಕೌಂಟಲ್ಲಿ. ಇಫ್ ದ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಪೇಡ್ ಆನ್ ಎ ಡಿಫರೆಂಟ್ ಬೇಸಿಸ್, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಅಚೀವ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಎ ನಾನ್ ಫೈನಾನ್ಷಿಯಲ್ ಆಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟಿವ್. ಈಗ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ದು ನಾವು ಫೈನಾನ್ಷಿಯಲ್ ಆಗಿತ್ತು, ಆದರೆ ಕೆಲವು ಸಲ ನಾನ್ ಫೈನಾನ್ಷಿಯಲ್ ಕೂಡ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು. such as the creation of a specified number of new jobs, the grant should be matched with the identifiable costs of achieving that objective. ಸೊ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಕಂಪನಿ ಜಾಬ್ ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿ ಸ್ಪೆಂಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತದೆ. ಸೊ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟಿಂದ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ ಸಿಗ್ತದೆ. ಸೊ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಜಾಬ್ ಕ್ರಿಯೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಅದು ಏನು ಖರ್ಚು ಮಾಡ್ತದೆ? ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ರಿಕ್ರೂಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಗೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿ ಅದು ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಪೇಪರಲ್ಲಿ ಅಡ್ವರ್ಟೈಸ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಕೊಡ್ತದೆ. ಸೊ ಆ ಅಡ್ವರ್ಟೈಸ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟಿಂದ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ ಸಿಗ್ತದೆ. ಆ ಅಡ್ವರ್ಟೈಸ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ ಅದು ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರೂಫ್ ಪ್ರೊಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದರೆ ಆಯಿತು, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ ಸಿಗ್ತದೆ. ಅಡ್ವರ್ಟೈಸ್ಮೆಂಟಿಗೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಖರ್ಚಾಗಿದೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಅಮೌಂಟ್ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ ಸಿಗ್ತದೆ. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್, ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ರೆವೆನ್ಯೂ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ಸ್. IAS 20 allows such grants to either be presented as a credit in the statement of profit and loss or deducted from the related expense. ಸೊ ಈ ರೆವೆನ್ಯೂ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ಸನ್ನು ನಮಗೆ ಪ್ರಾಫಿಟ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಲಾಸ್ ಅಕೌಂಟಲ್ಲಿ ಟ್ರೀಟ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ 2 ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಇದೆ. ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಏನು ಅಂದರೆ, ನಾವು ಪ್ರಾಫಿಟ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಲಾಸ್ ಅಕೌಂಟ್ನ ಕ್ರೆಡಿಟ್ ಸೈಡಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ ಬಂದಿದೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಅಮೌಂಟನ್ನು ತೋರಿಸುವಂಥದ್ದು. 2ನೇ ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಏನು ಅಂದರೆ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸಿನ ಹೆಡ್ ಇದೆ ಆ ಹೆಡ್ಡಿಂದ ಈ ಗ್ರ್ಯಾಂಟ್ನ ಅಮೌಂಟನ್ನು ಲೆಸ್ ಮಾಡುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಯಾಕೆಂದರೆ ಆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸ್ ಹೆಡ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರಾಫಿಟ್ ಅಷ್ಟು ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸಿಂದಾಗಿ. ನಾವು ಆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸ್ ಐಟಮಿಂದಲೇ ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಗ್ರ್ಯಾಂಟ್ನ ಅಮೌಂಟನ್ನು ಲೆಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದರೆ ಆ ಪ್ರಾಫಿಟ್ ಅಷ್ಟು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗ್ತದೆ. ಸೊ ಪ್ರಾಫಿಟ್ಗೆ ಅದರ ಎಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಸೇಮ್ ಆಗಿರ್ತದೆ. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್, ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ಸ್. IAS 20 permits two approaches. Both treatments are equally acceptable and capable of giving a fair presentation. First option, write off the grant against the cost of non-current asset and depreciate the reduced cost. ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಅಸೆಟ್ಗೆ ಏನು ಪೇಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತೇವೆ ಆ ಅಸೆಟ್ಗೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿ ನಮಗೆ ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ ಸಿಗ್ತದೆ. ಆಗ ಆ ಅಸೆಟ್ನ ಕಾಸ್ಟ್ ಅಷ್ಟು ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗ್ತದೆ. ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್, ಈಗ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಅಸೆಟನ್ನು 10 ಲ್ಯಾಕ್ಗೆ ಪರ್ಚೇಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೇವೆ, ನಮಗೆ 1 ಲ್ಯಾಕ್ ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ ಸಿಗ್ತದೆ. ಆಗ ನಮ್ಮ ಅಸೆಟ್ನ ಕಾಸ್ಟ್ 9 ಲ್ಯಾಕ್ ಆಗ್ತದೆ. ಹಾಗೆ ಆ ಅಸೆಟ್ನ ಕಾಸ್ಟಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದಂತಹ ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಗ್ರಾಂಟನ್ನು ಲೆಸ್ ಮಾಡುವಂಥದ್ದು. 10 ಲ್ಯಾಕ್ ಮೈನಸ್ 1 ಲ್ಯಾಕ್ 9 ಲ್ಯಾಕ್ ಅಂತ ಮಾಡುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಅದು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಆಪ್ಷನ್. ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಆಪ್ಷನ್, ಟ್ರೀಟ್ ದ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ ಆಸ್ ಎ ಡೆಫರ್ಡ್ ಕ್ರೆಡಿಟ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಫರ್ ಎ ಪೋರ್ಷನ್ ಟು ಅದರ್ ಇನ್ಕಮ್ ಈಚ್ ಇಯರ್, ಸೊ ಆಫ್ಸೆಟ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ದ ಹೈಯರ್ ಡೆಪ್ರಿಸಿಯೇಷನ್ ಚಾರ್ಜ್ ಆನ್ ದ ಒರಿಜಿನಲ್ ಕಾಸ್ಟ್. ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಆಪ್ಷನ್, ನಾವೊಂದು ಅಸೆಟ್ಗೆ ಡೆಪ್ರಿಸಿಯೇಷನ್ ಕೂಡ ಚಾರ್ಜ್ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತೇವೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ಆಮೇಲೆ ಗೌರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿರ್ತದೆ. ನಾವು ಫಸ್ಟಿಗೆ ಡೆಪ್ರಿಸಿಯೇಷನ್ ಚಾರ್ಜ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗಿರ್ತದೆ, ಯಾಕೆಂದರೆ ಒರಿಜಿನಲ್ ಕಾಸ್ಟ್ ಕೂಡ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗಿರ್ತದೆ. ಸೊ ಈಗ ಡೆಪ್ರಿಸಿಯೇಷನ್ ಕೂಡ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಯ್ತಲ್ವಾ, ಸೊ ಅಷ್ಟು ಡೆಪ್ರಿಸಿಯೇಷನ್ ನಾವು ಪುನಃ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಗ್ತದೆ. ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಅಮೌಂಟನ್ನು ಡೆಪ್ರಿಸಿಯೇಷನ್ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಮಾಡುವಂಥದ್ದು, ಅದು ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಆಪ್ಷನ್. ಸೊ ಇದಕ್ಕೊಂದು ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ನನ್ನು ನಾವು ನೋಡುವ. ಹೋಟೆಲ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಲಿಯಾ ರಿಸೀವ್ಡ್ ಎ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ $40,000 for the purpose of solar panels to generate solar energy at its manufacturing facilities. The asset costs $2 lakh and it has a useful economic life of 5 years. So depreciation formula ಏನು ಅಂದರೆ ಒರಿಜಿನಲ್ ಕಾಸ್ಟ್ ಡಿವೈಡೆಡ್ ಬೈ ಎಸ್ಟಿಮೇಟೆಡ್ ಲೈಫ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಅಸೆಟ್. ಸೊ 2 lakh divided by 5. So $40,000 is the depreciation. ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಅಪ್ರೋಚಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಟ್ರೀಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಹೇಗೆ ಅಂತ ನೋಡುವ. ಸೊ 2 lakh ಪರ್ಚೇಸ್ ಪ್ರೈಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಅಸೆಟ್, ಅದರಿಂದ 40,000 ಲೆಸ್ ಮಾಡುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಆಗ 2 lakh ಮೈನಸ್ 40,000 1,60,000 ಅಂತ ಬರ್ತದೆ. ಇನ್ಕಮ್ ಅಪ್ರೋಚಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರಾಫಿಟ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಲಾಸ್ ಅಕೌಂಟಲ್ಲಿ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ $40,000 ತೋರಿಸುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಸೊ ಇನ್ ಎಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಎರಡರದ್ದು ಕೂಡ ಸೇಮ್ ಆಗಿರ್ತದೆ.